here we are again. If you know me at all, you know I always have a new project. And well, I have a new project. I wouldn't be me if I didn't. So here we are with another project. We are going to start something fun today. This book, The Little Ghost Who Was a Quilt, is the absolute cutest little book. It's all about a little quilt, and he's different than all his other little friends, but it's basically about it's okay to be different. It is the sweetest, best little book for a child. We keep it at the shop all the time and we sell it all the time. So this is a very popular book. So I thought, well, why don't we make a quilt to go along with it? So that's what we're gonna do. This little quilt right here, we're gonna make that little quilt. And how sweet would that be to give this book and the quilt to a little child for a birthday, for Christmas, whatever. But it's just such a cute, sweet little book. So we have cut some squares, and we basically cut them out of just fabrics we already had, but in this color scheme. You could do it in whatever color scheme you want to do it, but since I'm gifting it with the book, I wanted to kind of mimic this quilt. So we are just going to take squares and sew them together. At this point, we don't know how many and we don't know how big it's going to get. I'm just going to make some and see what it looks like and decide when I want to quit at the size that I want to quit at. So we have cut 5-inch squares. Couldn't remember what size I had to cut, so I had to measure them. But I cut them in 5-inch squares. And we've got multiple prints in the blues and the creams and the little bit of whites mixed in there. But I am going to just sew them one to the other, and then we'll decide how big to make it. So to start off, I'm just going to take a couple of the squares and I'm going to put them right sides together, and I'm going to stitch down the one side. Everything I do is at 1/4 inch unless I state otherwise, but most everything I do is 1/4 inch. So I'm sewing it at 1/4 inch. Then I will take it apart, cut the thread, and have it like that. Then I will iron it flat. You can iron it at the end or you can iron it as you go along, whatever you choose to do. This one I'm going to take right here and do the same thing. I'm going to do this until I decide how wide I want to make it. This is only 3 squares, and you see how small this is. It's not near the size, obviously. So let's see. If this is 3, we're probably going to make it about 10 wide maybe, or that's what my thought is right now. This is going to be for a child, so I don't want it big. I want it the size where they could carry it around with them and carry it in the car, carry it to a friend's house, whatever, but I don't want it big like for a bed. So I'm going to keep putting some together, and then I'll come back when I've figured out about how big I want to make it. Okay, I have put 9 together and decided I think that's about wide enough for me. So I have also gone, let me show you over here. I've gone over and I've color coded my stacks instead of just one big stack, so that I'm not keeping on pulling the same kind of fabric out. So I've got all these fabrics in different stacks. Does this one not look like a pool liner to you? I don't know why, but it does. But anyway, off subject. So I've got all these different stacks of the different fabrics. I'm gonna pick one at a time, and I'm gonna keep making the rows of 9. Only thing I'm gonna make sure of is that I don't put this one right below this one, because it's right here. So this next row, I'm gonna try to put this one probably at the other end somewhere, and not start with this one or this one. So maybe I'll start with this one because it's not here at this end. So the only thing I'm doing is just making sure that the colors aren't combining from row to row. I'm going to sew 9, I'm going to sew 9 together, and then I'm going to sew the next row to this row so that I also don't combine all the same colors in one corner. So as I go and I make a row of 9, I'm going to go ahead and sew it so that I can lay it out and see what it looks like and see what the next colors need to be. So let's keep going. I've got 2 rows done now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to line them up, and then I'm going to take the top one and flip it on top of the bottom one. I'm going to pull my pins out, and I'm going to take this seam and this seam, and I'm going to line them up about 1 inch below the top, and then I'm just going to roll them to the top. That way I can see that those seams are still lined up, because I want them lined up as I go down this row. So I'll go to the second one. I'll go about 1 inch below, line those seams up, roll them to the top, and then pin them at the top. I'm going to do that the whole way down this row of the 9 squares, and then I'll sew them together. Now that I've got them pinned all the way down, I'm going to take them to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew down this seam all the way down at 1/4 inch. As I get to the pins, I'll take them out. I'll just keep making sure they're lined up. And then when I get to the end, I'll cut my thread and iron them flat. So now that I've got my block sewn for the 2 rows, I'm going to lay this out up here in front of me on the table so that I can see, okay, I don't want these prints too close to this side. So I'll know that like this print here is at the other end, so I'll put it down here maybe. Maybe I'll start with that one. And then another print that I don't see for a while is this one, so I'll put that one beside that, and I'll keep doing that. So that's why I'm going to keep this visibly in front of me so that I can see the layout, so I don't have all the same prints all together. So I'm going to keep doing that the way I've just shown you how to do it until we get it as big as we decide we want it. I've sewn my rows together, and this is the size I have decided to stop at, which is 8 blocks by 9 blocks. I don't want it so big that they can't carry it with them, so that's the size I'm stopping at. And now I need to put it on the quilt machine. We're now at the long arm and ready to quilt it. I've already done one little pass across it, but the way we do this is we grab our backing and we roll it on this machine, and then we grab our batting, lay it on top, and then the top on top of that. That's called sandwiching the quilt. So we've got the backing, the batting, and the top. And then we straighten it out, flatten it out, make sure all the wrinkles are out, that kind of thing. You don't want any gaps or anything on it. And then you go around and you pick up all the strings. Some of them just pull right out, and some of them we have to cut, like this one. So we'll cut all these strings so they don't get stuck in it. And once we are string free, we are ready to stitch. So we'll start stitching. So we will start stitching. This is the relaxing part to me. So I keep this going until I'm done with this pass here from here to here. And then I roll it up on the side here, and then I keep going until I'm done with the quilt. Once we get it off, we'll take it in there and bind it, and then we are ready to use it or gift it or whatever we so choose to do. So let's keep going. Now that I've got it all quilted, what I will do is I will unroll it from this machine, and I will take it into the other room to the cutting table, trim off all the excess, and then we'll start to bind it. I've taken the quilt off the long arm now, and we are ready to bind it. One thing I needed to mention first was long arming. I long arm for the public, so I long arm all of my quilts. It just makes sense to me. But if you don't have a long arm, you can stitch these on a regular domestic sewing machine. You don't have to send these kind to the long armor. Now, we do this size, we do larger, we do all size quilts. But I do know people, a lot of people, who stitch all sizes on domestic machines. It can be done. It's very cumbersome some and hard to roll up some, and depends on the machine you've got as to the ease of it, but it can be done. So if you don't have a long arm, or if you don't have access to a long armor, or don't want to send it to a long armor for whatever reason, don't not make these quilts. You can still quilt it on your machine. So I just wanted to throw that out there before anyone said anything about the long arming, because you can do this. I promise you, you can do this. But this right here is a smaller one, so it's very easy to put on the sewing machine and quilt it. So now we're ready to bind it. And I know I've got multiple videos out there on binding. I'm gonna show you real quick how I bind it. If you need more details or get confused, look back at one of my other videos where I go very slow in great detail on how to bind. So let's get started. For mine, I am using the same backing for my binding as well. And I have cut with the excess backing fabric, I have cut 2.5 inch strips from that fabric, and I'm going to take them and I'm going to put them right sides together, so the good sides of the fabric's touching at an angle like that. Then I'm going to stitch from here to here. So I'm taking it over to the sewing machine. I'm stitching diagonally across there. And when I get that done, I will take it out, cut my thread, grab my scissors, and cut just outside of that line. I don't want to cut the line, obviously, because I just sewed it, but about 1/4 inch outside of that. And that right there can be discarded. And now your binding is put together like that. So I'm going to do that for all the strips that I need to bind this quilt, and then we'll come back. Once I finished sewing my strips together, I took it to the ironing board and I just folded it in half and then ironed it flat. So now my continuous binding strip is ready to adhere. So I'm going to grab me a pin. I'm going to start on the back. If I was hand sewing, I would start on the front, but I'm not, so I am going on the back. I'm going to take this binding strip and put it down. I'm going to pin it where I started, but I'm going to wait about maybe 6-8 inches down, something like that. That's where I'm going to start sewing. I want this hanging so that I can attach where I finish to where I started, and it's still continuous strip. So now I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to start sewing. All my seams are 1/4 inch. So I'm going to stitch this on the back. When I get about 1/4 inch away from this corner, I'm going to stop. So I'm about 1/4 inch, I'm going to stop. Some people at this point do not cut their fabric, but I do. I mean my thread, not my fabric, my thread, but I do. So now I take it out and it's going this way, but I need it to go this way. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to put my hand here. I'm going to flip this back to cause this angle right here. I want it to look like that. So then I'm going to put my hand on top of that. I'm going to take this piece and flip it over my hand. Take my other hand and hold this down in place. Pull my other hand out, and now it's going the exact way I need it to be. But I need this not flying. I need this loose like that so that it can turn to the other side. So when I stopped about 1/4 inch going this way, now when I folded this, I'm going to start from the very corner. I'm not going to start 1/4 inch in, I'm going to start at the very corner. I'm going to stitch this 1/4 inch till I get to the other side, other corner, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'll do that same procedure on all 4 corners. And then I'll come back and show you how to do the front. When I get to the end, to where I pinned that, I'll take the pin out. I'll have my fabric just a little bit longer than I need it. I'll cut just a little sliver off, because this right here shows me that's 2.5 inches wide, because that's what I cut my binding strips at. So since these were 2.5 inches wide, I know this is 2.5 inches wide, and I don't have to sit and measure. So flip the ending piece out of my way. There's my beginning piece, and it's flat. I'm going to lay this right there where the start of it meets, and I know that's 2.5 inches down. I want this overlap to be 2.5 inches, so I lay this on top of it. I look underneath to see where that other one ends, and it's right here. Cut that off. That'll go in my scrap pile for a string quilt or something. Then I'll take these two and I will open them up, put them right sides together just like we did the binding strips, and I'm going to stitch from here to here just like we did the other binding strips, and it will work out to fit perfect. And now I'll cut this excess above where my stitch line was. And then when I pull this down, it fits perfect. So now I've got to stitch this down. So I'll go back to the machine and I'll just go a little bit before where I ended and start stitching all this down. Once I've got that stitched, then my whole back is stitched, I'll flip it over and I'll pull the back to the front. Now I'm not gonna pull it because I don't want that little tiny bit back there and all of this up here. I want it pretty even, so I'm just gonna lay it open and just fold it to the top. Then I'm gonna take it to the machine and I'm gonna stitch on the edge of that till I get to the corner. When I get to the corner, I'll show you what I do. Normally I would not cut my thread right here, but I need to show you what I'm doing. So this is where I'm at. This is where I'm flipping it over and stitching right here. But this is still on the back. This piece is still on the back. So I'm going to flip it up. Flip it all up down here so that it kind of makes that pocket right there. Sometimes you don't need to do this and sometimes you do, but you'll clip just outside of that sew line, that excess little bulk. It might be just a little piece of bulk, but it may cause a big problem. So if you need to, you clip that. If you don't need to, you keep on going. So I'll stitch this, I'll keep stitching, and then I'll have down here, it'll look like that. See that angle again? That's what you want. You'll have that when you've finished stitching this, you'll have that angle, and then you'll take it and just flip this side up like you did that side we just did, and it'll cause this angle that we're looking for, which is like that. And then we'll stitch it down. So let's keep going. So I'm going to stitch till I get near that end. And when I get that diagonal crease there at the end of the batting, I'll flip that lower piece up like I just showed you. Stitch it down. Then I'll rotate the fabrics, the quilt, and do the same thing down this side. When I get a little bit away from that corner, I'll show you what it looks like. Then I'm going to stitch this whole side just like I did that side I just finished. And when I get to that corner, I'll do the same thing we just did. And again, there's multiple videos out there on binding, so if you have questions, go look at those too. But that's the corner that you'll make. That's what it looks like. So now let's keep going. So I have finished binding now. The quilt is completely done. Cute. And ready to be gifted. So this is the quilt that is paired with this book, The Little Ghost Who Was a Quilt. Such a cute book. Open it up and you see the squares there of the quilt. And it's just a cute little book about a little quilt and how he was different from all the others. And it's just so cute. It's so cute. So this book with this quilt is going to be paired together to make the best present for a little kid. I've got an extra one and it's going to be a display at the shop. It's that cute. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching and happy quilting.